Well, Space Coast Daily is caught up with Port Commissioner Bob Harvey in advance of tomorrow's Port Commission meeting. Bob, thanks for joining us today. Tell us what are the more important issues in facing the Commission in tomorrow's meeting.
Well, thank you, Giles, and thanks for talking with me. I think one of the most important things that we're going to talk about tomorrow's meeting is the tenant lease. It's the DeSouza family tenant lease, but it sets the tone for how we deal with all of the tenants out there on Port Canaveral. I would like to see us change just a little bit how we're doing business and how we interact with our tenants. I have an overall goal that we elevate our level of discussion and be, let's say, more responsive to tenants and more responsive to the future of the port with respect to tenants.
Okay, so let me just ask you this, for those people who may not be familiar with the issue, kind of frame the issue for us, you know, from a general standpoint here.
Well, what we have is one particular lease that's up for renewal and has been negotiated back and forth for about 2 years now. At one point we offered to buy out the remaining interest in the lease, but then we withdrew the offer. And we're considering now just letting the lease expire, or a buyout option, or extending the lease. So those are basically all of the options that are available. And in those negotiations, we have talked about the opportunity to let the lease lapse and then just take the property back, having made the family having made several improvements to the property. The sticking point, I guess you would say, is whether or not to reimburse them for some value of the remaining value of their improvements. We have an opportunity to set the standard, as I said, going forward here, where we can negotiate with new tenants who come in, or current tenants who want to renew their leases, on how we are going to treat them at the termination of their current lease. Are we going to simply take back the lease with the improvements that you made without reimbursing you for that? Are we going to set a standard where we reimburse partially for your investment? Or are we going to renew your lease on a routine basis? These are things that future tenants and current tenants would like to know. So that's our policy that we're going to set tomorrow.
Okay, so the port obviously is in the business of leasing commercial space, and if this was not a public entity, you know, in business, leases don't get renewed all the time. Why, you know, as a port commissioner, do you feel as though this issue is something that should be discussed in a different manner?
I actually don't think it's a different manner. I think it's common business practice when a tenant makes improvements to a property and gains value. When we take the lease back, we then benefit from that increased value that they invested in. I think it's good business practice, good in the sense that you encourage others then to come in and make improvements, or current tenants to continue to make improvements, because they know that if they leave, or if we desire to take the lease back from them, we'll buy them out at a reasonable value. So I think it's a good business practice for us to reimburse some partial value of the improvements that they've made. It also encourages new tenants, as I said, to come in and make improvements. If we want to lease an empty piece of land, or a piece of land that needs improvements in order for that tenant to make more money, why wouldn't we allow them to make improvements? And then they make the improvements, and if it works out for them, works out for us, we buy it back at the end of their lease, and then we gain money and credit from their investment in our property.
So in tomorrow's Port Commission meeting, I believe there's an agenda item addressing this issue. What do you think is the ultimate objective here? Where do you want to see a deal made?
Well, repeatedly over the last 6 months since I've been on the commission, I've been asking for some kind of negotiation to an agreeable that both parties will agree to, the port and the family. They seem to reach an impasse, and so we're going to discuss all the options available tomorrow and hopefully come to something that they will agree to and we will agree to. In this particular case, a couple of years ago, the port offered to buy out the remaining interest, but then it stalled for some reason, and I don't know. That may be one of the options that's discussed tomorrow. Another option may be that we may just say thank you very much for being here for 40-some years, and thank you and see you. But all of the options are on the table. In my mind, all of the options are on the table, and I think that's kind of one of the things we need to discuss, is to keep all options open.
So a little bit of background information. The DeSouza family first leased this property back, what, about 40 years ago?
I think it's 42 years for this particular piece of property, but this family, literally back when the port wasn't the port, they came in, and when land was worth nothing, they came in and took a chance and leased several parcels, as many as 7 at one time. 7 different parcels where they built improvements, made improvements, invested their family, their life in the port property, and then over time they've been selling off their investments to continue to live out their retirement. I don't think it's an unusual thing for any other tenants to do the same thing. I think there's been tenants out there for many, many years. These just happen to be here for 40-some years, and I think they were instrumental in helping to build the port. I think we owe our initial tenants a little bit of something as far as payback. They paid us when it wasn't worth anything. They took a chance. They invested their life, their money into our port. It's a community port. It's a people's port. I think they were a big part of developing it, and I think we owe them something for that.
Okay, so the options on the table now, I believe the current lease that is in discussion ends on Friday of this week?
Yes, one parcel ends on Friday this week, and they still have another parcel that's leased to them for another 7 or 8 years, I believe it is. So it's the parcel that has been extended to this point that we're actually discussing tomorrow. What the resolution tomorrow hopefully will have some kind of agreement that everybody can agree to, and then walk away and close the deal.
Sure. So this is sort of like a watershed moment, if you will. There's many, many tenants at the port, obviously, who are paying very close attention, who have current leases, who may be considering making improvements to their property out there at the port that they're leasing, and maybe some new business that is considering making application for a lease at the port. So you're taking sort of a view that this is an important message,
yes,
setting
exactly.
the tone. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly. This sets the tone for anyone who wants to do business with the port by way of a lease. If you want to lease land from us, you need to be assured, or you need to have some assurances, that if you make valuable improvements, you spend $1 million on building a building, that somehow you're going to recoup your investment. So a negotiated deal ahead of time on what are you going to do at the end of your lease, or will your lease be renewed over time so you can continue to make money and recoup your investment. Otherwise, why would I make the investment to put a new building? Why would I make improvements if I'm not going to get my money back out of it?
Sure.
Yeah.
Now there's 5 commissioners on the Port Commission.
Yes.
All representing different districts. So you guys have a tough job, don't you?
Oh, it's a difficult job. We have to represent all the voters in the entire district and try to do what's best for the port, but also what's best for the community. And that's why I'd like to elevate this level of discussion. This isn't just about making the most money for the port. This is about being good stewards of the port money. This is about being good neighbors, good friends, good landlords, and maintaining respect for all of our tenants.